for a lot of people, when you talk to them about perfection, there's going to say that the old adage where, well, you know how perfection is. Nobody's perfect. Why strive for perfection? You can never do that. And yet we try and look at the parameters, and we try and look at how society is built and how we actually reward the things um, significantly better than those individuals that doesn't at least try attempt to have those perfection. We don't have any kind of answer to that. And so to be more specific about that, in that place, in that argument, we it's very true that when we're going to try and pursue something as grand and as big as perfection, it's going to be something that's going to be, should I say, pernicious to yourself and to your psyche. Maybe that's not something that you want to make ends with. And so, it's becoming increasingly difficult because, well, at one hand, you know that you can never get perfection, but at the same time, people around you and even the societies that's going constantly grading and constantly talking about your perfection are, it's there, and you're bounded by this perfect ideal, or at least trying to be perfect. And these things matter when you try and look at the grand scheme of things. And so how do we stay perfect? Well, the answer to that is we don't. We pretend that we are until we manifest ourselves as really imperfect creatures, because we are really imperfect creatures. But there's some things and some activities that we could perfect through time, through repetition. But then again, the answer then becomes consistency, because, well, you could practice a free throw and maybe you could shoot it every time, like 10 out of 10 at any given circumstance. But you're 20 years old. But let's say you become 70 years old, and, well, that's becoming increasingly difficult because, well, maybe your muscle memory might still be there. But here's the thing: your muscle memory might still be there, but the problem with that is that your body just collapses on itself, and maybe that's not something that you want, and that's going to be something that's going to embitter you, because you know how to do this, but some in some form, in some way, you have a limit just because of that. And you didn't go into any accident. There's no accident, there's no bad tragedy that happened to you. You just grow to become old and you become weak as a result. And so another form of trying to capture an ideal, because I think what perfection really is just trying to capture an idea, an idealized perfect. And why are we so hell-bent and so focused into trying to get perfection, even though we know that it's almost impossible to get it? Well, because we have an idealized beauty, and the closest thing that you can get to that beauty is just trying to be that beauty. And so there's different ways in how we could go about it, and how we could actually talk about perfection in that way. For example, if you're going to be someone that's going to be thinking about all of these things specifically in an aesthetic sense, you also want things to remain perfect for you for the longest of time possible. So another way of understanding perfection is how we were graded in the system as well. In the workplace, it's absolutely true that if you don't do anything wrong or actually make things better, or at least approximating perfection, you get rewarded more in the workplace, and you get rewarded more by the marketplace. The better your product is, the better that you're going to be perceived as more valuable than any of these other people that are whatever it is that they're trying to pursue. And so it's a constant battle, it's a constant upgrade, it's a constant regroup, and it's a constant way of understanding things on how you're going to actually pursue these types of perfection, and how you're actually going to make these things perfect. It goes back to this idealist form of what the true, or at least a perfect man or perfect woman embodies. And so the only way that you're going to unravel on those ontologies and stuff is that if you can actually idealize some form of an entity that you can actually model yourself with. And so it becomes increasingly difficult if you don't actually, if you can't imagine these things and these forms, and how you're going to orient yourself towards with, or at least try and approximate their nature. So it's going to be way difficult than you would actually think it is before you got started. And so it's nice to have idols. It's nice to have people that will remind you of these things, of these ideals, of these beliefs that you could actually look up to, wherein they're absolutely not perfect, but maybe some aspect in their life or some aspect of their field, some aspect of the things that they actually like, or the things that they have mastered through their craft, you can actually extrapolate sense of meaning out of that, and maybe through that sense of meaning you could actually perhaps just take at least 1% out of their character and just incorporate into your own. As it's like you're building so a Lego castle or something, and so you have all of the bricks in your disposal, and you were built in a specific way, in a different kind of different specific colors and different shapes of Legos. But you see someone that's absolutely grand, like this castle, and you're just and it overwhelms you because you're just like a little old 4x4 house, and that's it, and that's actually what your dream is, and that's actually what you're trying to do, and that's something that you're actually trying to make. And what it does is, when you see someone that's a giant castle, is that it obliterates everything that and well, I'm just trying to be a small house, and then this castle comes along, and you don't know how to orient yourself towards that, and it's going to shatter the idealized version of what you are building. You might think that you were building something that's perfect to you, but it turns out, this fellow comes along, not really knowing what your name is, but it had a major impact in your life, and maybe that's a detrimental impact in your life because it shatters your ego, it shatters the way that how you see things, and it shatters your sense of perfection into yourself, because you get to see them not only that they're maybe 100 times way bigger than you, but there's also a grandeur to their disposition, and that's much better. Maybe their blocks are made of gold or something, and so not only that the structure itself is magnificent and awe-inspiring, but also the structure, the building materials for that structure itself is actually even grander than things that you're doing. But maybe you're playing with dirt and they're playing with gold, and so how do you orient yourself with that? So that's just kind of the reality, and how we shatter our own idealized version of perfection. Thing that they're missing out here, that we're all trying to be the idealized version of ourselves in response to our belief system, and how we believe that to be true. And most people's belief system is structured into religion, and even if you're not a religious man, if you're a very pragmatic man, you're still bounded by the laws. You're still bounded by our man-made laws, and so whatever it is that's operating in your country, that's how it's going to work. And so these different laws, most of them are just bounded in our Judeo-Christian belief, and most of them are godlike in a sense, approximating to what God's ideals are for us. And so in a way, even though you're a pragmatic man, you're still bounded by the laws of God in some sense, because they're very much related. If not, the reason why they're related is because most of these laws are just derived from the things that we have actually put up as norms, or actually we have put as ideals, or we have put up as truths, and how we're going to deal with them. And so back not too long ago, there's been a group of people that settled on these things and have actually made a consensus that okay, this is actually how we're going to orient our society. You cannot kill, right? You cannot steal, right? You cannot cheat, and all of these things, and how it operates. And maybe if you can, if you do something that's going to hurt someone, and maybe that's a bad thing to do. And so they agree on these things, and well, here we are. And then again, we try and look at it. This is not a criticism of God. This is mere exploration of just trying to at least try and be near the surface, not actually touching the surface, but actually just being near the surface. That's how deep this goes. And so, how do we orient ourselves as immortals, as imperfect creatures, and trying to orient ourselves as gods? So So that's a difficult thing to manage. That's a difficult thing to be able to come in terms with, and how you're going to live with that fact is going to be way difficult than you'd ever think. You put yourself in a standard, a specific standard, and there's only so many standards you can actually put yourself with. And so it becomes increasingly difficult what kind of standard you're actually going to do with yourself. Like, for example, we are not bounded by just one standard. Growing up, we have different standards for ourselves, and maybe back then you just wanted to be the best at this specific play. Maybe you want to be the best rock and paper scissors player of all time in your school, and that's it. That's your standard. That's the thing that you believe in, and that's the thing that you put on top of your hierarchy on how you're going to be perceived in school. And maybe you're going to be much more popular if your friends think that you're actually the best at rock paper scissors. And then, of course, there's different ways in how we're going to measure ourselves and how we're going to approximate those standards. In marketing, we call that KPIs. Like, actually in business as well, if you're doing ads, like key performance indicators, and these things kind of approximate the things that we're going to have and how we're going to orient ourselves, whether we're going to be successful or not. And these things make a difference because, well, if you try and list the things that you want to be, you put yourself into the test, you put yourself there for trial, and you actually can see those things, and you can actually orient yourself towards those things into accomplishments of those things. But if you can't do it, it's going to be very difficult for you. It's going to be something that's maybe it will crush you. That's going to be the source of your anxiety. It's going to be the source of your sorrow, and maybe that's not something that you want to do. And maybe that's why a lot of people don't want to dwell on these things, because that puts them on the spot. That puts them in a place where they can fail. Because if you don't know how you orient yourself, and you don't know your goals per se, if you don't know what it is that you're actually aiming for, then you're completely unaware of these things, right? You don't know if you're failing because you didn't really put forward a goal. And so again, that's bliss in ignorance, but also naivete, because you might think that you're not failing, but you're absolutely failing, not only in this one thing that you didn't put forward, but you also are failing in everything else because you failed to do it, and you failed to try and verbalize or try to structuralize that in a much deeper manner, and that's going to haunt you for years to come because you didn't decide. And so a lot of people, this is a tough thing to think, Carl. I mean, why think in 10 years time? Why think in 20 years time? That's going to be real difficult. Well, that's true. There are only certain things that you could predict, or at least try and make assumptions for. This is very true for you when you were growing up. Back then, you might have a different childhood dream than what you have now. You might want it to become something what your friends would like to be, or maybe your superhero movies or things like that, or the cartoon characters that you've watched as a kid influence that to you. And maybe back then you wanted to become a policeman, but maybe back then you wanted to become a pilot, you wanted to be a nurse, a doctor, and all of these things, and now it's completely different. It's nowhere near that, and you don't know how to orient yourself because it's a reality check for you and for everybody else. Like, wow, I thought I had it figured out when I was 7 years old. Turns out that there's so much more that I could learn. And, that's a very challenging task to try and battle, because, well, that's your life we're talking about here. This is not some test that you could fail and you could take again. It's your life. I mean, one small mistake can take you years out of your life, just because you were pursuing the wrong thing, and that's a scary thing to do, and that's not necessarily something that you want to at least try attempt to, even though you are already attempting that without your knowledge. And so how do we go about this? How do we structurize our life without being too specific that it haunts us, having too specific that it absolutely condemns us and absolutely enshackled us rather than free us? So how we're going to do that? So there's different ways that we could go about that, and there's different ways and how we could go and deal about that. But I'm going to tell you, like, what's going to pop in my head right now. So one thing that I could think about right now is that you have to be flexible about these rules, right? There's no law that's going to say to you that once you have this goal, you're going to go for that till the end of time. There's just nowhere that you can absolutely think about that in one sitting. So if you have a revelation, maybe you're just sipping your coffee or something, or maybe you just woke up in the middle of the night, and then all of a sudden you have a revelation manifested into you, and where you actually realize that, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Maybe that's not something what you actually want to do. So it becomes increasingly difficult the more that the more that you're going to be talking about it, and the more that you're actually going to do it. But that's not how to do things, right? Because these revelations will come, but very few of these things are well taught. Maybe there's just a spark of an imagination, a spark of inspiration of some sort, and they're just there for you to extrapolate. They're just there for you to peruse and really read into and try and dismantle and what it meant or what it means for you during at that time. And maybe that's not something that you actually want to orient yourself with. So how do you deal with all of these things? When you think about it, what made you like the things that you're doing, right? It all started with a small idea, right? It just started with a small idea, which you then nourished through time, which became this giant idea. And so once you really know and how you became in love or passionate or vehement about something, that's actually how you're going to be much more cautious on how you're going to deal with everything else that comes your way. Because, well, if something that small can be this big of an impact in your life right now, then you might as well think about it in detail on the next thing that comes along. So that next thing might be your interest maybe in some sport that you haven't played ever, and then you being introduced to sport, you becoming addicted to the sport ever so increasingly through time. And that's not something that you actually hoped for 7 years ago, but now it's there, it's your life, and you find yourself with your teammates and having workout routines and things like that, and you're having fun, and you never really anticipated that. And so that's in complete dissonance with what you have set out to do. So that's going to be increasingly difficult as you go on. So how do you do this? How do you keep structure? Well, here's the thing: you gotta be flexible. And I think I said that before, but let me try and be much more specific and much more clear here, and how you're going to orient yourself. Most people ask the wrong questions, and that's why they have the wrong answers. And so one of the wrong answers is because it's very popular in social media. What's your purpose? What is this thing that you're going to set out to do in your world, and you're going to continue doing, going to be doing in perpetuity until you die? And so that's going to be a huge choice, because well, if I'm going to do something in perpetuity if I die, well, I gotta think about it in detail, because me not thinking about it in detail might mean my peril, and I must suffer at my peril. And so that's not something that I actually want to have. And so how do you orient yourself with things like that? And so, well, have structure, but don't take it too seriously. Have structure, but don't take it too seriously. And you don't have to put yourself in that spot where you get to decide what you have, or maybe something manifests into your life, and you're telling you in your instances and everything about the innuendos are there, and it's telling you, hey, this is what you have to do, right? This is what inspires you right now. This is what interests you right now. It's not necessarily something that's going to be your life in a grander scheme of things. So it's not going to happen that way. Most people think in in what they do for the rest of their life. Maybe because the really good celebrities are just like that. If you try and look at LeBron, you don't really look at LeBron as any other being whatsoever. You know that LeBron is all about basketball. The same thing was with Michael Jordan, and that's why when Michael Jordan ventured into golf, it's weird, and Michael Jordan ventured into baseball, it's weird because we know as Michael Jordan is this idealized basketball player, and so we have been inherently taught and at least structurized in a way of into understanding things that one person gets to have one gift and they do it the rest of their life, which is absolutely untrue. Most people have different endeavors at different parts of their life and maybe majority of their life, but there very few people have just one trade until they die. And so that's just a lie that we tell ourselves, and what the society, or at least what people of authorities have been telling us over and over again. What that's not necessarily true, and how we're going to deal with that. So when you're going to think about the next endeavor, the next big thing that you're going to be busy about for the next 3 months or for the next week, for the next day, just think about it in this way, right? It doesn't have to be your life purpose, because chances are that's going to be a really difficult thing for you to understand and try to come in terms with. It's going to be something that's it's not there per se, but it's going to be something that's non-existent for the most part. You're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, and you don't know what underlies beneath. And you might spend 5 years into that craft, and only to realize that you don't actually want it, don't actually like it. So that's how most people that started out from the bottom, and then once they reach success, they're like, well, I thought it was better than this, right? But it turns out to be something that's way below than their expectations of it to be. And so that's because, well, you might be exploring just one iceberg in an ocean of all of these icebergs, and there's different icebergs that you can explore, and you're only exploring the tip of an iceberg of just one iceberg. But there's lots of icebergs out there that you could explore, and that's the difficult part. That's where the anxiety happens, because, well, especially if you're a young kid, if you're in your youth, and maybe you're in your teens, and maybe you're in your absolute way to becoming an adult. So you become something that's pure potential, and once you're pure potential, you can be anything. And when you can be anything, that's that usually tries and stop you at where you are. That paralyzes you, and you tend not to pick, because, well, why pick? Because you can be anything. Well, you gotta pick, because it's much better than not moving at anywhere at all, because there's no such thing as you're not, if you're not picking something up, there's no such thing as picking nothing. Because when you're picking nothing, you're not actually picking nothing, you're picking something. But whatever it is, it goes back. It's a backwards thing that you do. It's not something that's going to forward you in life. It's going to be something that's going to drag you way behind than you'd like it to. So that's how it is. Don't think about the next endeavor or your purpose per se as your life's purpose. Think about it as just your purpose for the day. What's your purpose for the day is, what's your purpose for the week, and that actually decreases a significant amount of your anxiety, because you're not putting yourself into the spot of where you have to think in this grander scale, which, by the way, you could never predict with very little thought. So for the people that absolutely understands that, or actually have figured it out, good for them, because now they can focus. Now they could care less about anything else, because, well, the mere fact that they're doing this means that they're doing something out of their purpose. But even so, there are people that are absolutely good at one thing but decided to not do it anymore because it doesn't interest them. The marketplace wants them to do it, but they don't want them. They just quit on the top of their game and decided to do something else. Why? And this is something that's increasingly popular in movies, and and you see it in other people's as well. Maybe not that frequent in other teams, but it's there. You get to see people that quit on top of their game and maybe fake their death per se. You have this not having to have a tinfoil hat on, but there are people that's going to fake their death, for the sake of normalcy, for the sake of you know restarting over again, because they become so successful that they can't get out of it, and there's just no way to get out of it without without lawsuits and without stress. And so the best way to go about it is to pretend that you're dead. Of course, all of these are speculations, and all of these are maybe theories. And as I said, this could be me wearing a tinfoil hat. There's a temporal boundary to that, and there's a temporal boundary to all of us, that that if we fail to see, we might spend the next 20 years just because, well, we're young, and then all of a sudden we have gray hair, all of a sudden we have silver hair, and we don't know what to do with that, and all of a sudden we didn't have the energy of our youth, we didn't have the dreams that our youth has, we didn't have the imagination and the optimism of our youth. And so it becomes increasingly dreadful to spend our life if we lose that. So that's something to grasp, that's something to adhere close to, and that's not something that you could actually hear about someone that's having an existential crisis per se, because most of them, they don't know what's going on. Everything was good, and then I'm old and I don't know what's happening, and I don't know what's wrong, but it's there. Most people don't know that, and they can't be consciously aware of that because, well, it's difficult, and they haven't really thought about it. They've been pushing it away ever since they were kids, ever since they were in their 20s or things like that. They don't want to think about these things because, well, we're young, and then you're old, and then you still don't want to think about these things, and how the hell you're going to think about these things now, right? Because you've been blinded for so long, and it's a difficult thing to have before you go to sleep. Think about the day, what went wrong, what went right, what are the things that are happening, maybe what are the things that you can do in the future, and what are the lessons of the past, and maybe how you're going to equip yourself better tomorrow. And maybe that's better, it's a better way of thinking about and how you're going to go to sleep, rather than thinking about nonsense. And a lot of people can't shut off their brain, and you see this in social media, people posting that they have this midnight thoughts or 3 a.m. thoughts, and they just can't sleep whatsoever, and it doesn't make them stop. Why? Because there's no end to it, there's no resolution to it. And, well, that could be pathological, but at the same time it could be just something that you don't just you just don't know, as simple as that. And so if you don't know, and you have a very curious mind, it's going to be very difficult for you to shut it off. Here's the thing also, and to put back the Minecraft reference, once you just dig down, like straight down, you cease to see what's around you because you're just stuck in one hole. But if you can dig to your right, you can dig to your left as well, and to more forwards and backwards, you can actually see more. And once you do that, not only that you're digging down on certain problems, certain things, you're actually expanding your knowledge into different things as well. I know that there's a saying that in terms of knowledge, you don't want to have a big piece of land. You just want to have one piece of land and dig down as deep as you can go. But I actually disagree on that. You got to have something that's almost general to the point, but not too general that you lose sense of what your specific thing is at that moment. You have to be specific and general at the same time, because all of these things that are happening simultaneously will help you dig a little bit deeper on those things. Real difficult for you to dig onto these things if you don't have the necessary tools. And maybe the tools doesn't exist in that one hole, and maybe that tool exists, going back to the Minecraft reference, maybe you have to mine it in some mountain, maybe you have to mine it in some other area, in some other minefield, and that's how you're going to get it. Not necessarily in that hole, but in other holes, in different areas, and different things that you can explore. And so you equip yourself with all of these tools simultaneously, and how you're going to get to the bottom of that specific thing that you're pursuing. And so it goes back to the idea of perfection, of being all of the things at the same time. We can't do that, but we try and be that because that's God, and we idealize God, and that's the best form there is. But I don't think that we have the necessary mental capacity to be able to even attempt and grasp what that power is, because that's infiniteness and we're very finite creatures. And so it becomes increasingly difficult the more that we think about all of these things. It's like thinking of the fourth dimension. We can't think about it. We could have illustrations about it, but really there's no way to think and conjure up things that are beyond our mental capacity. So how are we going to be thinking about those things? Well, the answer to that is that we try and we fail, as a proud men as we are in failing, because we will try most definitely. But those who really tries are the people that gets remembered. They get remembered because they approximate some specific area of what perfection is, even for just one thing. And so the more thing that you can be recognized as perfect in those things, the more that you're going to be higher into the hierarchy of the people that we actually care about. And so if you have someone that is only known for one specific thing, that someone is going to be beaten by someone who's good at 2 things or 3 things or 4 things. That's why great leaders are known not only for being good leaders. They might be good citizens, they might be good soldiers, they might be good diplomats, they might be good Democrats or Republicans, they might be good Americans, good citizens, and things like that, all encompassing into this giant creature. And how we're going to know about them. They could be charismatic people, they might be the masses, the opium of the masses during at that time, and maybe there's someone that can have that oratory skill that can absolutely have major impact on the way that you deal with your everyday problems and your everyday scenarios. And so in every day that we do in life, it's almost like we're chasing something that's impossible. It's almost something that we're chasing, and we're trying to be something, and we're trying to mold ourselves into something that's way beyond our capacity to be, but at least we try to. And the very few people that there's going to be very few people that is going to try it, and even fewer who's going to get close. And the people that get close are the people that gets rewarded in the marketplace. There's going to be the people that gets remembered, that gets read of over for thousands of years, because these people change the status quo. These people absolutely dream of something way bigger than themselves and way bigger than their character, and they become their own character of themselves, and they try to become a stereotype. Even they try to embody a certain word, a certain phrase, and how they're going to do these things. And so that's how they do it. And so it becomes increasingly problematic the more that you think about it, because the nihilists and the cynics will say, well, what's the point of doing all of these things if you can't really achieve it? Well, here's the thing, it's better than not doing anything. It's way better than just being you and not actually achieving anything. And a lot of people might have a different opinion on that, because you could be way cynical than you could ever be, that you would try and think that, well, if it's all going to go to ruin, why attempt it in the first place? And that's a completely valid argument, right? Because if it's just going to go on shambles, and why attempt and why waste your time into trying to be something that's going to be eventually forgotten? Many heroes have done that. Many heroes that didn't get to have the kind of reverence for the things that they have done. How can you possibly think about a better way on how you're going to orient yourself without thinking how you could be God? Well, first thing is that you can't. And even though if we try and look at the Judeo-Christian belief, we know that Jesus is part God and part human. Other people will say that no, that's not actually true. There's no 50-50 going on. It's 100% God, and at the same time it's 100% human. So okay, whatever it is that you believe in, it's impossible, because even though that there's a human element to it, even though that there's a mortality attached to it, and we know that Jesus is immortal because he actually died. But there's many ways and many things in Jesus and where we couldn't fully grasp as human beings, and that's why skeptics happen even in their timeline. And it's easy to be a skeptic today because, well, you don't necessarily see it. But during at that time, they're still skeptics and they're seeing the miracles happen before their eyes, but they're still skeptics. They're still not believing. And, well, that's kind of like J. Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man, right? He sees the good things that Spider-Man is doing, but at the same time, he refuses to believe it because he thinks that there's an ulterior motive underlying Spider-Man's acts. And so he doesn't want to believe that. He doesn't want to believe in the Savior. He doesn't want to believe in a New York where there's going to be a utopia in Queens, New York. That's where Spider-Man is, by the way. And so how do you orient yourself with that? How do you deal with that? Well, one thing to think about it is that we might think that Jesus is perhaps the one that's closest that we've got into understanding what the human element versus, and at the same time having a celestial element attached to it. Well, because one is mortal, but at the same time, there's many ways Jesus is different than us, and that's, well, he could turn water to wine, and he can turn a piece of bread into thousands of breads. He can walk on water, and all of these miracles can heal. So the more that we think about it, the more that we get to realize of just how far we are into the reach of their powers. And so the more that we realize of just how much we have been trying to be something that we cannot become. But we have to be okay with that, because at least in the pursuit of that, we become closer to that. Even though we don't actually achieve it, we become better beings and we become better citizens as a result of that. And maybe that's enough. Maybe not a lot of people wants to do that. Maybe not a lot of people wants to have that pressure in their life. And of course, you have different ways of thinking about that. There's a different ways in how you're going to deal with that, and that's just something that is different for other people. So I guess to perhaps spend the next 10 minutes into wrapping this idea up between perfection, let me just say a few things about it before I finally wrap it up in about 10 minutes. We all have ideas, we all have dreams, and we all have aspirations. And that's one of the major realizations that I had last year, that whoever it is that you're facing, whoever it is that you see on the streets, on your commute, each of these people, each of these faces, each have their own dreams and aspirations. Each of them wants to be somewhere else rather than there. Each of them loves something or is absolutely passionate about something. Each of them have their own mastery of something, their craft and their jobs, and they're absolutely good at it. Each of us have dreams, and that really encompasses a lot of things for me to be a little bit better and understanding of just how much the same and alike we are, because we are all trying to be someone else. We are all trying to be an idealized version of ourselves, and that might not necessarily be the best version to become, because a lot of things can corrupt us along the way. But we could be optimistic that it could be something that's the best for us really in reality. And so that's going to be a lifelong exploration. It shouldn't be something that you think about in one sitting. Right? Don't take any idea for granted. Anything that you get to hear and you get to read and you get to watch, don't take it for granted. All of these things are trying to influence you, and if you're not careful, it might very well bend the way that you see things and the reality of which, and how you see and how you value the world and what you think a perfect idealized version of you might be. And there's different ways and different traps and you can get ensnared in, and that's not something that you want to be in. And so what you have to do is that you have to be optimistic, but at the same time you got to be pessimistic about every new ideas that comes your way, and actually take a step back and reassess whether it's a good idea or not, whether it's going to have a major impact in your life or not, whether it's going to be something that's going to work with everything that you know beforehand, and everything that you currently know, and the skill set that you already have right now. So that's what it is. There's this one tweet of mine that says, don't let ideas make decisions. Don't let trends make decisions for you. And this is where a lot of people get wrong. They see a trending topic and they immediately drop in on it, and they immediately adopt these trend topic because they want to be in the know. It means that the more that you spend on these things, is non-important things, is trivial things, the more that you rob yourself of the time into actually discovering yourself, rather than whatever the next clown comes about in social media. And there's a lot of clowns out there. There's a lot of people that's going to make a fool out of themselves for your attention, because that's the easiest way to capture attention. If you can find someone that's way worse than you, if you can find someone that's that's completely, or at least supposedly stupid, or someone that's very incompetent at what they do, you criticize them, because it's easy to criticize people that's below you, but it's very bloody well difficult to criticize someone that's actually better than you. And we tend to lower our heads for those people. We tend to become like this over towards that people whenever these people came about, or at least near presence. But for the people that are way below us, we tend to become superior, become haughty, or become condescending. Why? Because that doesn't come too often. And so if another fool comes in, social media does all of these things, we tend to focus our energy on that, because at least in that moment we can win. Whatever it is that's happening, whatever wrong is happening during at that time in our life, is maybe we're completely failing on all of our goals and all of our objectives, but we can look at these fool, well, maybe I'm not doing bad as I think I am, as bad as I think I am. And so that's how it works. We tend to give our energy to the things that we know that we can have instant gratification for. And these fools over the internet, it's easy to pay attention to them because it makes us win a little bit, right? We could criticize them, we could say bad things about them, which is very easy, right? It's very easy to criticize people that are absolutely, or at least objectively wrong, but try to criticize someone that's near perfect. That's going to be bloody well difficult, and that's going to be, you might even get criticized for trying to criticize the perfects. So that's it. A little bit world of reminder is that I started this live not having an idea or topic in mind. I just have some form, like a whisper of what it is, but it didn't turn out it didn't turn out as I would like it to be. And it's not something that I've actually planned it to be. It became something way different than I would have initially expected it to be. But there you have it. And for those people that's going to watch this live in the replay, thank you. And if you extrapolate, or at least try and find some value in it, share it to whatever, to whoever, or maybe not at all. And so that's it. The mere fact that you are someone that benefited into this is enough. So thank you. Bye-bye.